Well, good evening. My name is Mitch Weisberg. I'm here for Edchat Interactive. Tonight we're having Ann McMullan talk about leading change in challenging times, and I think for a lot of people, this election has been a challenging time, and the post-election could be a challenging time. So this is really a time for us all to learn life lessons in leadership, and that's what we're going to be discussing tonight. I'd like to give a brief introduction to Edchat Interactive and the platform. Um, what what we start to do in Edchat Interactive is find people who are doing really interesting things and allow them to share their knowledge with others in a much more interactive format than a webinar. What I've done is I've expanded the slides, and if you find that my image is blocking the slides, you can move my image. But let me go through a couple of the ways that you can interact this evening. Uh, First of all, underneath your avatar, you see that there's two icons. One is the raise hand button and one is the ask button. I'd like to come up on stage and talk to Ann, or if you'd like to get my attention, if you click on that raise hand button, I'll see it, and then I can hook up with you and we can figure out what you'd like to do. We'll also be using that at times. Ann is going to say, can I have a volunteer to come up and talk about what you're doing in your school? In which case, you'll click on the raise hand, I'll see you, and I can bring you up to the stage just as I am right now. The ask button is what you'll use to ask a question. So if you have a question for me, or if you have a question for Ann, click on the ask button, and that'll give you a dialog box. You can type in the question. For anybody who's using a tablet, it doesn't look like there's a tablet user right now, but if you're using a tablet, that's the way you can interact with others, is through the ask button. And then the third way of interacting is through back channel. What I'd like you to do is I'd like you to bring your cursor over your avatar, and what you're going to see is a 5-item menu, one of which is I am. Please click on that I am. Now that's going to open a channel where you can type in comments to Ann or to other people in the classroom. And what I'd like you to do is, into that I am box, I'd like you to type in where you're from, and also type in something that you'd like to get out of today's session, and that'll help us. I'll shrink this for a second so you have a little bit more room on your screen, but that will help us understand what you'd like to get out of the session. So open up that I am box, type in where you're from, type in what you'd like to get out of the session. Now the one person who won't be able to see that is me, so I hope that you're actually doing that, but Ann will be able to see that this evening. Then the fourth way of interacting, and I'm going to expand this for a second, is that you can click on the avatar of any other person and get into a conversation with that person. If they have a microphone, and especially if they have a webcam, you can do something very similar to having a hangout with that person. And so I thought, as an introductory exercise, I'd like you to click on the avatar of another person, and one of those people is Ann, so you can actually click on her avatar as well. So click on the avatar of another person, introduce yourself, and maybe just talk to that other person about what distinguishes a leader from a manager or a follower or anyone else. So I'll give you a chance to do that. I'll stop my broadcast, and then I'll come up in another minute. I see somebody is already talking to Ann, so that's good. So if you don't have a mic, what you can do is you can answer this question by putting it into the I am box. And again, now I see that there is a person with a tablet, and if you're having a tablet, then basically the way you'll interact is on that ask button, and then I'll see what you type in, and then I can pass it on to others. So those are the different ways that we're going to interact during the course of the evening. I will say that tonight's session is sponsored by FETC. If you haven't been to FETC, it's probably the top technology conference. It's certainly the top one in the winter. It's in Orlando, Florida, January 24th to January 27th. And for those of you who are here tonight, if you do go to the registration at fetc.org and use the code EDCHAT4, let let me just, I have to type something into Ann. So, so Ann, pull apart from the person that you're talking to, and my audio won't be repeating because you're hooked up with another person. So just click on something to break away from that person, and and my audio won't echo. So, so anyhow, with FETC, if you go to the registration link on the screen right now and you type in the code EdChat4, you'll get a $30 discount. So the Anne is actually going to be speaking at FETC, and you can hear her and a whole series of speakers. On November 16th, we're having Beatriz Arnillas. She's from Houston ISD. She's going to be talking about managing digital resources in the classroom. And then on November 30th, we're going to have Gail Lovely talking about technologies and literacy in early learning. And they are both going to be featured speakers at FETC as well. So really, without further ado, I'm going to bring Ann up. Ann's new book is Life Lessons in Leadership. And so, Ann, let's bring you up to the stage. So, good evening.
Good evening, Mitch. Thank you. It's just such an honor and a pleasure to be here with you. I'm moving myself around on the screen just a second, but it's great to see all of you, and I appreciate you all joining tonight. This is going to be a great conversation, and I'm just so appreciative of having participants from across the nation and actually some international even signed up as well. So we're going to look at leadership tonight. You know, it's truly a critical topic for our times. And Mitch, I am not seeing the slides, but if you can
Okay. No, I was just gonna.
that'd be great.
Okay, I'll pull myself down and pull your slides up.
Great, thank you. Perfect. Got it. Love it. So yes, we're going to look at leading change in challenging times. I think challenging times may almost be the norm in some ways lately, and particularly in education. So we will focus a lot on the aspects of leadership in education. And so Mitch, let's go ahead and move to the next slide, please. You know, Mitch did a beautiful job of explaining how this system works. It has always been my philosophy that whenever I'm fortunate enough to be in a room with 1 or 20 or 100 or 200, particularly educators, I truly believe that the smartest people, the reality is that the issues that we face as educators are really too complex for any one person to have all the answers. So one of the essential keys to our success in our professional life is truly collaboration. And I really believe that we are all smarter and wiser together than any one of us is on our own. Collaboration is also going to be the key for tonight, and that's why Mitch kind of walked you through some of that process, because the way I have structured this tonight is that it's really not so much about listening to me, it's about all of us talking together and learning from each other. So I really hope that you will take advantage of the opportunity to talk to colleagues and to also talk to the group as a whole, because this isn't going to work for any of us unless we jump in and we all talk together. So Mitch, I'd appreciate next slide, please. So this is going to be our focus for this evening. We're going to examine the challenges confronting education today, looking at it both from the perspective of education leaders, and by that I mean classroom teachers, school administrators, district administrators, but we're also going to be looking at it from the perspective of people who work outside of school but still work in the education field, either with private business or organizations that support the work of educators. And in that process, we're going to reflect on the strategies for leading the changes that need to be made today. And then we will review some leadership skills at the end that actually apply to leaders in multiple situations and from all ages. So as we work through the slides, you're going to see that from time to time, there will be an invitation for you to join with another colleague. And you'll see that your cue will be that little black circle that you're seeing on the screen now with the two individuals talking to each other. When that appears, I would love for you to either talk to each other, or Mitch will invite someone to come forward and speak to the whole group. But that's our cue that we want to not listen to me so much, but talk to each other and get our conversation going. And of course, as Mitch mentioned, you're also welcome to add your thoughts and your reflections at any time in the IM chat, as he showed you how to do by putting your mouse over your own icon. So Mitch, let's go ahead and move on to the next slide, please. I want you to stop and think for a minute about the challenges that you might be facing within your own environment, if that's education or if it's something else. It's really hard to imagine that any educator today in any role in K-12 teaching and learning is not facing multiple challenges, particularly in just the aspect of getting learning right for all of our students. You know, I've listed just a few on the screen that you see there. And the reality is that today's school and learning environment is so different than what most of us experienced when we were students in elementary school, middle school, high school. And the issue of getting learning right for all students would be tough enough on its own. But now we have a lot of other challenges when you look at the ones I have on the screen, for example, around funding, accountability, standards, closing the achievement gap, and much more. You know, when you look at that poor little puppy, it really is enough to give a poor puppy a headache. But Mitch, let's take a look at the next slide, please. What I'd like us to do is to start off at this point and have you chat with each other about 2 or 3 items, challenges that you may be facing in your own setting as a teacher, as an administrator, as somebody who supports schools. And let you go ahead and take that opportunity to talk with each other. And as you share your challenges, if you also have suggestions for meeting those challenges, share those with each other as well. And I'd be happy to chat with 1 or 2 of you also if you'll join me. And
Okay, so this is your time to one of your times to interact. So please click on the avatar of another person and talk about them about a couple challenges that you're facing or that they're facing in your and their role in education today. Now, if you don't have a webcam and if your microphone isn't working, open up that IM window and type in some comments there and share them with other people. You can also type on Anne's avatar if you want to talk with her directly, and I'll pull myself down, and then we'll come up in a few minutes. Hi, Ann. So maybe we can ask for a volunteer. You know, it'd be great if somebody who has a webcam, if you can click on the raise hand button, then let me bring you up and just talk to Ann about a couple of the challenges that you're facing that might require some leadership. And then while people are trying to figure out, you know, whether to click on the raise hand, just let me ask you a question. It seems like one of the issues that educators face often is time. There's so many things that you want to cover in your class, and there's the required curriculum. There's the things that make life interesting. You're always stuck with a lack. How do you use leadership skills to overcome that challenge?
well, you're right. There is never enough time, and I think part of our challenge today is as change happens so rapidly, it seems that we just get one thing on top of another on top of another, and that begins to eat up more time. And so the notion of systematic abandonment of things that we don't need to be doing anymore is sometimes difficult. But if we can figure out how to do that, that sometimes buys us some time. And
Hmm.
then, as honestly, we're all learning how to leverage technology to collaborate, to pick on other people's areas of expertise and bring that in. That can buy us some time as well. And even sharing teaching strategies and sharing teaching duties sometimes can help teachers do that. I find that the whole notion of professional learning communities is a great way to leverage the technology and to buy some time. But there is no question that you have hit on a real issue. Time and funding are probably the 2
Yeah,
biggest bugaboos
right.
in education.
So nobody's raised their hand. Now, my guess is virtually everybody here has taught or is a teacher. and you face the same things in your class, and you're used to getting up and talking to people. So maybe on this one, we'll give people a break and not ask, not ask again. But you have plenty of other interactions here that are scheduled, and next time, please click on that raise hand button and let us bring you up. And it's really enjoyable here talking to Ann.
Yeah,
I could talk to
yeah.
Ann for hours. So I'll bring myself down
Thank you,
and I'll
Mitch.
bring your
And
slides
we'll
back
go.
up.
Thank you. Thank you. So, we titled this discussion Leading Change in Challenging Times. But in doing that, I was thinking and kind of wondering how often is it that change is the real culprit, that change is the challenge and the root of the challenges that we are facing. Asking people to change what they have always done can be one of the biggest hurdles we face. And yet, I wonder sometimes why the notion of change is so difficult, because there are times when change not only viewed as a good thing, but really embrace enthusiasm. Think back to the last time you had to trade in your old car for a new car. That was a change, but that was a good change, and you were excited about that. Or shopping for new clothes, new shoes is always a big deal for me, and I love that. Changing your routine to go out for an evening and be with friends. Getting a raise would be a change. So, why is it that changing the way we teach or changing the way we run our school system seems so difficult? And Mitch, if you'll go to the next slide, this is again where I'd love for somebody to just pop up and volunteer and share with us why they think change is so difficult. Either from the perspective of somebody who has had to lead change or somebody who maybe has had change imposed on them and found it difficult. So let's wait a couple seconds and see if we get anybody in the IM chat or to volunteer and raise their hand or at least even discuss with each other.
So, well, again, I think to me, one of the big reasons why change is so difficult is that whenever there's change, there's a potential for things getting worse.
Yeah,
And all of us are really, as bad as things are, the idea that things could get even worse freezes a lot of us, right?
yep.
Um, and it looks like we do have that Christy has volunteered.
Yay,
So
Christy,
that's
yay.
even better than my question. So
I love
let
it.
me bring
Let's
Christy
go.
up.
Yay, thank you.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Christy, hi, thank you.
Hi. So I am a media specialist at a high school, and I am in charge of our instructional technology team, and I lead staff professional development. And I think that change is difficult for people because it leaves them vulnerable, and it puts them in a position, especially in front of students, where they might not be ready to um, fail or make mistakes, I guess. So I think part of it happens to sure it's embracing the growth mindset. It is showing kids that you can experiment. It's showing adults that you can experiment. And I think it also you need to have that ideology of resiliency so that you can bounce back from those. But you have to have the courage first in order to kind of put yourself out there.
Thank you, Christy. I think you have hit on so many valid points. I think we have had this perception that as teachers we need to be perfect, and we can't make mistakes. And then there's also the issue of control. We're supposed to control what's going on in this classroom, and therefore there should be no mistakes. So that's very intimidating. That's honestly where good leadership, and thank you for your leadership on your campus in helping teachers work through that process, because granting permission to make a mistake is a real gift, and to say it's okay. We're going to try this. We're going to work on this together. If it doesn't work, we'll figure out what didn't work and we'll do it again. So I really appreciate your comment, and appreciate the work that you're doing. It's a tough road, but we've got to do it. We cannot You know, in my former life as a classroom teacher, I was a history teacher. And as much as I value, yay, as much as I value students understanding their past, I do think that we do them a tremendous disservice if when students walk into a classroom today, they're walking into the past. You know, if they're walking into 1950 or 1960, that doesn't do them any good at all today, and it certainly won't do them any good as we try to prepare them to go out. So we all have to just be brave, jump in, try it. I mean, tonight we're learning through this process with Mitch, and there are some clicks that are working and some clicks that aren't, you know, and that's okay. We'll keep getting it through together. So Christy, thank you for that. Do we have any other brave souls like Christy who will come up and share a thought or two? Paula, yay.
Hi, good to see you. Good to see everyone. I was just going to share something that I learned. It was like 2 weeks ago. A friend of mine completed her master's in art therapy, and so her teacher had all the art therapists, those who had graduated or still in the program, et cetera, come and do some art therapy, and she invited me in this workshop. And there was it was a great experience, but one of the things that she said that I think is very helpful as you try to deal with change and making mistakes was she was trying to guide us through this process, and it just sort of wasn't going well. And she said, "Oh, you're just mistake making," and it was just a way to look at, oh, well, I'm mistake making, and let me do my next thing as opposed to I've screwed up and I've missed. It was just a very different way to think about it that I just thought I would share. It was very empowering.
I think coming in the context of art therapy, that makes sense, because if you think about art, it's not perfect every time. I mean, you just get in. So I love that phrase, mistake making. I think that's one to share with students because it would be empowering to them as well to know that it's okay. As long as you keep learning from those mistakes, it's okay, and keep working. Thanks, Paula. Great to see you. Anybody else? Okay, then Mitch, let's go ahead and bring up the next slide.
Yeah, let's move on. Okay. No, I was going to say let's move on.
Perfect. So there are a lot of really smart people who have done a lot of work around looking at, if you're going to lead change, that there are certain elements that have to be in the picture in order to do that. And I'm kind of paraphrasing the work of several people here, but I'd like to just go over some of these with you, and then maybe we'll have a little discussion around them. These are not necessarily all of the elements, but they are need to be there. And if you are navigating change, certainly one of the first is that you've got to have a well-articulated, clear vision. You know the old phrase, if you don't know where you're going, any path will get you there. And so if you don't have a clear vision about where this change is supposed to go, it'll be a real mess. So you've got to have it. It's got to be well-articulated and clear. Then all of your stakeholders really need to have a thorough understanding of the why behind the change. And I'm going to tell you quite honestly, particularly working in the ed tech field, this is sometimes I see as the one real element that messes us up most of the time. Schools or districts will buy technology, they will put it in classrooms, and the why we're doing it is never quite communicated. Oftentimes the how or the what will be, but not the why. So we've got to understand, and anybody that's got to lead change has to be sure that the stakeholders all understand the why behind the change. And then you've got to look at motivators. What's going to drive people to implement that change? And you as a leader have to understand those incentives, those motivators that make each individual want to do what you want to do. And I think teachers know that because they know their students, and they know that they've got to motivate students in different ways because students are all different. So as a leader leading an enterprise, leading change, you've got to do that as well. And then you really have to ask yourself, do the people who need to make this change have the skill set to make it? And if they don't, you've got to help them get there. And our first speaker shared to that as being one who is the instructional coach on the campus, the technology coach. To do that work is remarkable, and to help teachers with those skills. So you can't just expect people to make change without having the skill set to do that. And then finally, there has to be an action plan But I put the word dynamic in there because the action plan has to have the capability of being flexible. Because if we're doing like Paula said along the way, we're just mistake making, we need to factor that into our plan and adjust the plan if what we've discovered was not the right thing to do. So those are 5 concepts coming from, as I said, the work of a lot of other folks. And what I'd like to do is move to the next slide, Mitch, and let our collaborators tonight look at those and kind of share out what happens, what have they seen happen if any one of those elements is missing, or even more so, are there others that they know are critical to leading change that maybe aren't on that screen just yet? So again, let me give you all the chance to speak, or maybe we'll just have people come to the front. I think that worked really well last time.
Okay,
So
so
Mitch, I'll let you direct
let's have a
traffic here.
volunteer. Click on the raise hand, and in the meantime, let me ask you: why is it necessary that all stakeholders have a thorough understanding? Why can't we just say this is where we're going, or tell people, okay, it's time to change. Just do this.
Have you raised kids, Mitch? When you say just do this, it doesn't always work, and that's true with adults as well. You want people to understand, and that's why the clear vision is so important. But then, yeah, you know, I don't know. We live more. It may be part of being in kind of an innovative entrepreneurial sort of world that we're in that we question why. And so even if you don't communicate the why, it's not worth doing. I mean, if you're going to put that effort in. And I think the stakeholders need that also.
Yeah. So as I look over the list, I'm reminded of a book, the Wisdom of Teams. I don't know if you've read that book. I think it's by Katzenbach.
Okay.
The Wisdom of Teams is Harvard University, and they had a similar 5 things. But one of the things that was fascinating to me is that number 4, the prerequisite skills, became really the least important of the 5, because if there was a clear vision, an understanding of the why, and the motivation and a plan, then team found a way to get the skills and resources that they needed, even if they didn't start off with the skills. So whereas that was absolutely necessary for the end product to be done, it wasn't necessary as prerequisite at some point.
I like that. So it becomes part of the process as well.
It becomes part of the process, right?
It becomes part of the process, yeah. I appreciate that. I think if we don't pay attention to skills, then people are just going to be frustrated. So either they can have it before we start, or yeah, it's going to be a learning process along the way. But we need to be sure that we have processes in place to support people to get those skills, whether that's beforehand or not.
Or other resources. And actually, and I would say the skills to me, the skills is part of the resources, but there's other resources, because you may need a certain amount of time, you may need budget, you may need hardware. So I would say skills is part of that broader thing of resources.
Right, and I would agree with you, and I think all those items that you just listed need to be clearly articulated in the action plan that we talked about. So
Yes.
These are the things we're going to do, and this is the time when we hope to get it done, and this is the person responsible. I had a boss in a school district where I was working where we had action plans, and we would meet once a month and go over those action plans and have to identify, what item was complete, what hadn't been started yet, and if it hadn't been, why not? And there may be really good reason why not, it just wasn't time yet. Or was it in process? So to keep track of that, and then, as I said, to look at adjusting when you need to. So I appreciate your thinking on that.
So, and I'm wondering, if people in the audience, if they have other things that they feel should be added to the list, or questions about why things are on the list? Are people typing into the IM with comments
Well, I'm
or?
seeing that Miss Deal has the book Innovative Teams right in front of her right now, so
Ah,
that's one
okay.
that she's dealing with as well. So
Hmm.
that is one comment that I have seen. So thank you, Christy, for putting that in there. Um, yeah,
Okay.
just some things to think about. But we can move on.
Okay.
And
All
if
right. I'll
somebody
bring
needs
myself
it
down.
later, they can raise their
Yep.
hand and it may come to them
Okay.
later, and that's fine. I'm good with that. So this is another concept, and I just want to spend a couple minutes on this. I think sometimes, particularly in education, we may have made the mistake of putting really good managers in leadership positions. And the reality is, I think what we're all coming to understand is that the skills involved in management and those involved in leadership have some similarities, but they also have some real differences. My own thinking around this is that as a general way of thinking, if processes and programs are running well, then you need a strong manager to keep those things running well, to look to all the details, to be sure that everything is flowing the way you know it's supposed to flow. And that will keep a successful program going. But if what you need is a change in direction, then a lot of times the skill sets of a manager, the list checker and so forth, just doesn't work in that new environment. So you have to look at different skill sets when you're looking at a leader. A leader has to probably be more people focused than process focused, and they'll both have to give attention to both, but need to really look at those things that we identified before about articulating the vision, being sure that all the pieces are there. So as we think about moving people in our systems from being really good managers to now having to lead, it's important that we have conversations around which of those skill sets will transfer and which of those need to be somewhat different. So I just put that there to kind of put in the back of your head as you're thinking about that. And Mitch, let's go ahead and go to the next slide, please. And at this point, Mitch has a video he's going to run for us. This is about a 3-minute video. I love this title. Change is so good, you go first, you do it. So Mitch, I'll wait for you to run the video clip.
Okay. Sorry, I clicked you down by accident. Are you back up?
Okay, I'm back
Okay.
up, and let's bring that slide, please.
Okay. So just
Okay.
what did you there seemed to me like a number of really interesting themes in that video. Do you have like pointers for people? Like what would you most want people to get out of the video?
And
And
you
I'll
know
pull
what?
myself
If
down
you
and pull
bring
the
up the
slides.
next slide, if you bring up the slide, it'll be there. Thank you, Mitch. I appreciate that. Yeah, so there you can see, and I really appreciate Mitch asking the question. I do want to first of all give the folks at Simple Truths and Source Books, who I checked with ahead of time, and they gave us permission to go ahead and show the video clip in our conversation tonight. And I really want to credit Mac Anderson and Tom Fedelstein, who wrote the book, Change is Good, You Go First. And it may be something that some of you want to explore even further. And you can always, if you look for that on YouTube, you can find that same video clip. I never get tired of seeing it. So I have highlighted, honestly, just two of the points that he made that really resonated with me. But the reason I put let your actions speak in the center, I love that line that, you can't teach culture. You have to live it. And it goes on to say, you have to show it. I really believe that a true leader must always be sure that his or her actions reflect the truth behind the efforts that they are leading. Um, and I see this in education when we look at the changing role of a teacher, because rather than being, the authority, the person who's delivering content, the expert in the room, what we're beginning to see is that the role of the teacher is really becoming the lead learner in the classroom. And if you are the lead learner, you are really validating to your students how important learning is, and that it is a lifelong process, because there you are, the teacher, learning as well. And to quote Paula, you're the mistake maker sometimes, and that's okay, because that's part of the learning process. So those were a couple of them that I put up there as well. I love the notion of stand with them, not above them. We are all in this ship sailing together, and we need to be colleagues in that way. The notion of setting the stage for innovation, to me, is still connected with the idea of permission to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes and move on. Otherwise, you're not innovating. And true confession, I will tell you that looking at the data and measuring results is not my most favorite thing, but it really is important. But I think we all know we have to be careful with data. And we have to really look at it from multiple sides and be sure that we're getting the right data. But we do need to measure, we do need to factor in a number of things as we look for that success. And the focus on the strengths. Goodness knows there are enough critics around to beat anybody down, but you've got to focus on your strengths, focus on the critical few who can really get you there, and don't worry about the others. So those were just a few, Mitch. Does anybody in the room have any others, or even want to comment on some of those that I put up there? We'll invite you to come forward if you want to do that.
So I'll tell you, and hopefully somebody else raises their hand. But I noticed that there was a theme also of simple. And,
Yes.
make it simple. And just from my perspective, I differentiate between simple and elegant. Simple, just very often, you start off and you do something simply, and it doesn't cover what needs to be done. And then you realize how complex something is. But if you can realize how complex something is and still make it simple, to me that's elegant. And so I kind of differentiate those two terms as simple on the left side, and then complex and then elegant on the right side.
I'd be interested in what some of our participants think, because I agree with you there. And I think one of the ways that teachers make a complex lesson simple is to chunk it out. Don't try to
Yeah.
cover the whole broad spectrum, and swallow it whole. But if you can present things in small chunks and people have time to absorb that, understand that, show you that they understand it, then you can add another chunk and you build the layers. And that's how you get to the complexity, because you've got the whole thing there. But yeah, no, and I love your pairing up simple and elegant, because if it's done right, it really can be quite elegant. I'm going to ask one more time if anybody wants to add. Yeah, that'd be great. Okay, we'll go to the next slide.
And you know, people who have comments, please type them into that IM box, or raise your hand and we can bring you up and you can discuss them. As you see, it's fun.
So Farron had a comment about not. I'm looking in the IM real quick, and I'm scrolling back down. Let's see here. Okay, well, we'll move on to this point because I am going to be careful of the time as well. So yeah, and I appreciate, it's an interesting segue, Mitch, about keeping things simple. So I want to share with all of you, I recently had the opportunity to spend some time reflecting on the various leadership roles that people experience in their own lives. And it oftentimes starts at a pretty young age. And as I was going over that, and I was getting questions, a lot of questions about, in my school district, how did you all make it happen? How did this come around? What was the leadership piece that was there? So as I started reflecting on that, 5 very specific skill sets emerged, and those skills seem to really apply to leaders at any phase in life. And at that point, I had the very good fortune to meet a wonderfully talented writer named Michael Barrett, who lives in San Antonio, Texas. And we worked together to put these life lessons in leadership together in a book form. And the book actually just came out a few weeks ago, so I'm very happy to share that with the audience tonight. And what we do in the book is present each of those 5 life lessons in leadership skills in prose to teach the lesson, and then in wonderful verse written by Michael to illustrate that lesson. And he uses 2 characters who you see on the cover of the book there, 2 delightful Wallaby characters, Sheila and her daughter Josephine. And they have to deal with a lot of dastardly folks and lead through things. So it was a fun book to write, and I'm happy to share some of it with you tonight. So let's go to the next slide, please, Mitch. So the premise of the book is that in this fast-changing, hyper-connected world, it is a given that at some point in your life, the opportunity or the responsibility of leading others is going to fall on your shoulders. And you can see that when you look around you and even reflect back on your own life, you will see that there were times when leading others became your job. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide, please, Mitch. For some, leadership can start at a very, very early age. In fact, in my own case, I'm 9 years older than my brother, and there were just the 2 of us in the family. So sometimes being the oldest sibling in a family, that person serves as a leader to the younger brothers and sisters in the family. In fact, if in no other way, that person is at least helpful in showing the younger brothers and sisters how to deal with mom and dad. And that can be very useful information for the younger ones in the family. And once children go to school, they have multiple opportunities for leadership, and it might be in sports, in band, in different organizations. And more, as teachers, we are giving students the opportunity to learn leadership skills through the learning experiences that we are designing for them, things around project-based learning, for example. And you can see I have included a photo of Malala Yousafzai, I'm going to say that name right, Yousafzai, as an example of a young leader. And most of you, I'm sure, have heard of Malala and her incredible work around education for girls globally. And, you know, that started after Malala was shot by the Taliban and then began to take on that leadership role along with her dad. So, you know, we see leadership at all ages in various functions. Let's go to the next slide, please. And this, I think, gets to really an essence that I think all of you need to think about, and that is that the truth is that the role of a parent and the role of being a teacher, I really see those as 2 of the most impactful leadership roles in our society. Because as a parent, you impact not only your own children, but through them, many generations to come. And we all know what impact a good teacher has on his or her students. And those students can number into the hundreds or thousands over the course of a teacher's career. So the privilege and the honor of leading students through their education is one that should not be taken lightly. And in both roles, as a parent and as a teacher, leadership skills are essential. Next slide, please, Mitch. Now, traditionally, we think about leaders in their adult roles, typically their adult professional roles. Some of the titles, like teacher, which we already discussed, apply, but also you can see some examples on the slide there. Professor, principal, director, in that case, you're looking at a director, administrator, superintendent, a coach, a general, a CEO, a prime minister, or even a president. Those are all leadership positions that we recognize. But no matter what the title, if the job is that you've got to lead others and not simply manage successful processes that we talked about earlier, then there are some basic essential skills for that leadership. So next slide, please, Mitch. Again, what I would love for people to do is either engage in conversation with their colleagues, or maybe we can have some folks come forward and just talk about leadership roles that you experienced either in your own youth or in some non-professional role, or leadership that you have been asked to take on as a professional. And in the interest of time, I'm going to ask for a volunteer just to raise the hand and come forward so that we can all benefit from knowing what your experience was.
Well, I'll come up.
Thank you. And
So,
I'm seeing a couple things in the IM, but go ahead, yeah.
oh, okay. So go ahead. What are some of the comments in the IM?
I'm looking, so Farron said something that may have been earlier about not focusing on the critics, and he is a technology instructional coach,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm trying to see the rest of his, and he's posted a video about the innovation train, which we can share later with folks, so he has the address there for that. So Farron, thank you for that, and we will be sure that that is shared out later. So yeah, Mitch, go ahead, your comment, thought?
No, you asked for leadership roles, and basically, I've been a parent, and I've taught people. But the other thing, one of my roles, I do volunteer work for an organization called AFS, which is an exchange program, and I'm second level support. So when a family with an exchange student starts having some problems, they go to their liaison, and then if it's a problem that the liaison can't handle, like if then I'm often called. And I'll tell you, it's scary to walk into a situation where you have people from different cultures, and the host family has generally extended their home to somebody, and something just isn't working out, and you have to figure out a way for them to either engage and work it out, or separate without bad feelings. And it's kind of scary to walking in there.
Boy, the diplomacy involved in that. But what a great service you're providing.
Well, thank you.
And that's a part of leadership as well. And actually, if we can bring up the slides again, we're going to
Sure.
talk about service in leadership. This notion of servant leadership is a phrase that has been around a while, and when Michael and I were writing the book, we really based those 5 leadership skills that we covered around this notion of servant leadership. Because when you are in that leadership role, it's really not supposed to be about you. It's supposed to be about the people that you are leading. And what you need, as it says on the screen there, a true leader in any capacity is going to strive to make those around them successful. And because if everybody's sharing that same vision, then if everybody is being successful in their task, then they're going to get there. But your job as a leader, and it kind of alludes to what Mitch was saying earlier about the skills, you have to help them get the skills to do what they need to do, and the resources and all the other things that come there. So as a leader, you're not just the big boss on the stage. You've got to really be, in sometimes, behind helping to serve and make that work. So that concept of servant leadership, I think, is particularly important in the education arena. And I see that conversation coming up even in the relationship between district administrators and school leaders. You know, that yes, we are district leaders, but we are here to serve you and see that you are successful. And teachers are here to serve students to see that they are successful in meeting the standards that they're required to teach. So I appreciate that, and I think, Mitch, the example you gave is one of serving in a very powerful way, and sometimes in a tricky situation. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So these are the 5 skills that we cover in the book. They are to listen, to learn, to love your people, your program, your process, leveraging the talents of others. And in luck, we're looking at how do you create your own, number 1, but how do you prepare for luck so that you're ready for it when it appears. And I'm going to go over just 3 of those real quickly tonight because we are coming up on our time. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide, please. There's probably no more important skill for any leader than listening, because a leader cannot know the full scope of all the issues that they're dealing with without listening to others and truly listening. Let's go to the next slide, please, Mitch. I'm actually going to give you on this next slide a quote from the book itself where it says, "The ability to truly listen, not simply to hear, is a leader's most important skill, because it is through active, engaged listening that a leader begins to understand the realities of what is truly going on with both the people and the processes she is leading." But listening alone isn't enough. Listening has to be followed by appropriate action of some kind in order for the leader to maintain legitimacy. Because if I just listen to you and I never do anything based on what you said, then you're probably not going to talk to me too much anymore. So, there has to be that back and forth communication. I think the role that Christy described in how she's working with her teachers, she's got to listen to them and understand their frustration and where it's not working right, and then help together to come up with a solution that will help them be successful and look good in front of their students, which is part of the fear that she talked about that they face. Let's go ahead and move to the next slide, please, Rich. So very close on the heels of listening is learning, because there's a real close correlation between listening and learning when it comes to leadership. I grant you that listening is not the only way that people learn, but listening to those you are leading is critical to any leader's learning process. And I don't think that has ever been any more true than today, where everything is changing so rapidly. And as a leader, you have to admit to your group that you are leading that you may not know something, and you need to go find out. And you may find out from them, you may find out from others, but you are modeling why learning is so important. And the 4 C's that we talk about, the collaboration, communication, critical thinking, and creative problem solving. Those are skill sets that we say are so important for our students today. They are important for workers today, but they are important certainly for leaders most of all. And I want to close this learning piece with this quote from John Kennedy. I was really struck by this. This was actually written in a speech that Kennedy was supposed to give in Dallas in November of 1963, but we know that didn't happen. But I love this line: "Leadership and learning are indispensable to each other." And they truly are. And Mitch, let's go to the next slide, please. The other one, and this gets to the heart of even this collaborative discussion that we're having tonight, the notion that we've got to leverage the talents of others. There's no way we can do everything on our own, and so you need to know what skill sets other people have and leverage that talent. One of the people whose talents I have leveraged for a long time is Kathy Hurley, and Kathy is the co-author of the book you see on the screen, Real Women, Real Leaders: Surviving and Succeeding in the Business World. And Kathy co-edited that book with Priscilla Shumway. And in the book, there are stories, multiple stories of women and various leadership roles in a lot of different industries. And what they talk about are the competencies that they had to have to get to those leadership roles and the pathways that they took there. But I have heard Kathy, she puts it in the book, and it's in this piece as well on the screen. And I'm going to just, if you have no other advice from this tonight, take these 3 pearls with you. One is the notion that you should network even when you don't have to. You just never know who you're going to meet. And I am finding in this world that it's not 6 degrees of separation anymore, it's about 3. I may know somebody and you know that person, and then we connect together. Paula knows that story very well. So network even when you don't have to. Jobs change, but people don't. So don't burn your bridges. And I think that's an important thing we have to teach students today, because we all know that the notion of having 30 or 40 years in one place for a career isn't going to happen for them. So they're going to be switching jobs quite a lot, and they may be coming back to people that they worked with before. So the notion of not burning bridges is very important. And then the final one, always err on the side of generosity. Let's go ahead and move to the next slide, please, Mitch. I was going to ask folks to think about those three, but I'm going to let that be a homework assignment. I want you to think about those three pieces of advice from Kathy, and think about where they can apply, where they may have already applied in your life, or where you might implement them going forward. And we are coming up on time, so Mitch, I'm going to go to the last few slides, please. Writing the book is that, first of all, it's a very short, quick read, just about 24 pages in the book. And the goal of the book was really to present these 5 leadership skills in an entertaining and engaging way so that they're really easy to remember. In fact, you can count them all on the fingers of one hand. And my thinking behind that was that if you are a leader and you find yourself in a situation where it's not going quite the way you need it to, you can raise your hand and you can just go through. Am I not listening, learning? Am I not loving enough? Am I not leveraging? Have I not prepared for the luck or do the prep work ahead of time to be ready for it? So just running those thoughts through on your fingertips can hopefully get you through in a bind and hopefully enjoy the book as well, but mainly to get to that point. Okay, Mitch, next slide, please. The pitch is that the book is available now, as I said, just in the last few weeks, only online at these 3 sources. We have some sample text at lifelessonsinleadership.com. You can learn more about the book there and see some of Michael's great writing about Sheila and Josephine as well. And let's wrap this up, Mitch. Let's go to the next slide, please. I do want to thank FETC and Mitch for the opportunity to have this conversation together. What we've seen in the IM, as well as your comments coming forward, very enlightening. And I hope that you have enjoyed that in different sessions there. And I hope if you're there, you will introduce yourself and we can meet and talk further. A couple of other places where I will be doing some conferences around leadership coming up at the TASA Midwinter Conference in Austin. That's a Texas Association of School Administrators. And actually, Kathy Hurley will be joining me for some leadership workshops there. I'll be at TCEA in Austin. And then Kathy and I are going to be in California together for ASCD. And with that, Mitch, I'm going to turn the last slide over to you.
Thank you, Ann.
You again.
And
it's been just a real privilege.
something. So I'm going to turn it back to you for a second, and I'm just going to say, I know you brought up the 3 things from Kathy Hurley. As something for people to take away. Maybe just what would be the first thing for a person to do if they wanted to change something in their school?
As I said at the beginning of this, I'm really big on collaboration. So I think you take your idea, and if it's changing the way classroom management is going on, I'd discuss it with the students. I would say, here's a challenge that we're facing. How might we together solve this? If it's a change in an instructional strategy and you want to do something a little bit differently, I think anytime teachers have a chance to go into other classrooms and see what teachers are doing, it's a great way to learn. But I would never implement anything without talking to somebody else about it first and say, does this notion really make any idea? And, Julie Evans with Project Tomorrow did a webinar earlier today. And in one of her things, she talked about sometimes what we see and what actually are 2 different things. And I think that's something, is this what you see? Or I can tell you in my writing, and when I was working with a team, I would put something out there and I would say, okay, am I saying what I think I'm saying, So I would go back to, and that's the beauty of it, and we didn't plan that back and forth, but I do think that this as a conclusion. The collaboration and the learning from the people, as we've had the opportunity to do tonight, is the first step anyone should take when they want to think they need to make change.
And that's fascinating because I get into long conversations with Tom Whitby also, and he talks about, you're talking about collaboration as far as change management and leadership, and he's talking about very often conversation as the key element to andragogy or adult learning. That adults learn best socially, and they accomplish more socially, and you begin that through conversation and collaboration, not with saying, oh, I'm gonna change this, do this. That's fascinating. Well, thank you for appearing tonight, and I'll see you at FETC, and maybe at some of the other conferences, and hopefully we'll do another session together.
That'd be great. Thank you, Mitch, and thanks to all the friends who joined us tonight. Thanks so much.
Okay, and so this is Mitch Weisberg. I'm signing off for Edchat Interactive. I hope to see you next week, where we're having Beatriz Arnias from Houston ISD. And everybody have a very, very good evening. Good night.